Thank you all so much for joining us for Ask a Recruiter, Tech Recruiting Truths No One Else Will Tell You. We're really excited to have Bryan Williams here. He's a senior technical recruiter from Apptronik. I'm going to give a formal introduction just after a few slides as people roll in so we can know all about what you have to offer. We're so excited that you're here with us, Bryan. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So I just want to talk a little bit about how this Q&A session is going to work. We're really going to keep it focused on questions and answers. We're going to start with an intake survey, with our intake survey questions. So we're just going to start with five from the sign-up form that we've highlighted that we think kind of cover a few people's concerns. And it's just to warm up the session. While that's happening or afterwards, you can type your extra questions into the chat. And when you do that, please let me know if you want to read them out loud yourself or if you'd like me to read them for you. If you're somewhere noisy, I'm happy to do that. Although we really love it when people ask the questions out loud. We'd love to hear your voices and have that real engagement. So please feel comfortable doing that. If you want, you can also raise your hand during the Q&A if you want to just ask a question out loud and not bother typing it, or just to let me know that you'd like to read it if I start to read your question from the chat. That would be great. So I'm going to just introduce and talk a little bit about what Wellfound is in case someone doesn't know what it is. You joined through LinkedIn or something like that. And then I'm going to introduce Bryan and we'll just get right to the questions. So for anyone who doesn't know what Wellfound is a jobs marketplace. We've been around for over 10 years. And we've really focused on getting people hired by cutting edge startups. Since we've been around for so long, we also have lots of kinds of companies in our system, enterprise, startups, a big range that really focus on tech roles. We have over 8 million, we've made over 8 million matches. We have over 150,000 tech jobs in our system and over 10 million candidates. So I'm really excited just to let you know about Wellfound. My name is Rachel. I don't think I said that. I'm a senior product support specialist. So I'm the type of person you'd reach out to along with Alejandro and Megan, who are also in our chat. You'll see them with the Wellfound backgrounds. So if you ever have any questions about Wellfound or you write to our help emails, it's us that you'll be talking to. So without further ado, let me introduce Bryan. As I said, he's the senior technical recruiter at Apptronik. And he's also worked in, sorry, I'll just read this. Bryan Williams is a senior technical recruiter and talent acquisition professional with over 10 years of experience across agency, enterprise, and startup environments. He specializes in product engineering and design recruiting. Bryan began his career at an agency as an agency recruiter before moving in-house to Indeed, where he spent nearly 4 years supporting the product management organization as well as the Indeed incubator. This experience gave him his first exposure to lean startup principles and 0 to 1 product development. Later, Bryan joined Workwise, a late-stage startup focused on disrupting the energy sector, where he managed a technical recruiting team for 2 years. And most recently, he was brought on to Apptronik, a humanoid robotics company, as the second recruiter for the organization. Under his talent acquisition guidance, Apptronik has doubled in size in just 8 months and has recently closed its Series A fundraise, which is really exciting. So thank you so much for being with us, Bryan.
Fantastic. Yeah, happy to be here.
So Bryan, you have full permission to give us the honest, candid answers to these questions, because that's what the session is all about. So the first question that we have is about screening process and sort of transparency. And a participant named Michael asked, what determines whether a candidate moves past the phone screening? So
yeah, I think there's quite a few things involved there. And I think it would help to understand how we get to that stage in the first place. So typically when a new position is opened, I'll have a meeting with the hiring manager and we'll do an intake, a download for me. What are some things that I might not find in the job description that are important here? What are some of the criteria that we're looking for? What's the profile that we're looking for in layman's terms here? What are some things that are attractive about the role that I can kind of use to sell this a little bit to people if it's something that maybe needs a bit of additional motivation. And so I'll take all of that information and I'll get on, let's say we have 100 applicants for the role, and I'll narrow that down to 15 to 20 to put in front of a hiring manager. And I'll say, hey, pick out your top 6 or 7 candidates here that I can start to kind of do some initial screens with. of those folks, it really is what determines whether you move past the phone screen. It's just kind of how you stack up against the people who made it that far. It's going to be a lot of this similar questioning in terms of particular skill sets that are, critical for this, that are must-haves versus nice-to-haves. Are you in the pay range? Are you able to relocate, or do you currently live in the area if that's a requirement? Is there any kind of restrictions that you have on accepting an offer within a reasonable time frame? Are you in competing stages with other people? All of these things kind of play a factor. We also want to get a feel for how you are like how's your communication? Are there any red flags that pop up? Are you, just bad mouthing your former employer the entire time? That's things that we're going to be on the lookout for. We want to make sure that we're comfortable putting you in front of additional people within the organization. But we also, this is a moment for me as well to be an advocate for the company that I'm representing. I'm the first layer or face that you're going to associate with this company, and we want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward as well. So I want to, be able to be well informed and knowledgeable about it, really anything that you might have questions about. But at the end of the day, what determines whether you move past the phone screening is just how qualified you are for the role based on my knowledge of that, as limited or in depth as it may be.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful to illuminate what that process is like for you with the hiring manager as well. Great. Let's get to Kaya's question. This is about resume visibility. How do I get my resume in front of a hiring manager when there are 100+ applicants for each role, which I think in this market is like such a
very common,
prevalent question.
And 100 is, if you're lucky, it's only 100, we have roles that I've cleaned out 500 applicants from it on multiple different occasions, and like we're still on the search for it. So it's frustrating, it's difficult. And at the end of the day, like this might be an unpopular answer, but it's going to take some work, some doing. You really need to familiarize yourself with the job descriptions of the roles that you are applying to. You need to really be mirroring the language that is used in those job descriptions, specifically around kind of keywords. Because for me, in my process, what I'm going to do is, if again, we have roles right now that I have 500 applicants for them. It is not feasible for me to manually review each one. I have to do something to apply some filter that I can reduce that the best way that I know how. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to run the job title. So if we're looking for a product manager, and I run a filter of anybody that has product manager in the title out of 500 applicants, you'd be shocked at how many don't have it at all. And so my suggestion is, let's say, hypothetically, you're interested in this role as a product manager, but you've been working as like a product owner or a program manager, even though essentially you're doing the same job, but it's maybe a slightly different title. You're very confident you can do the role. Go ahead and modify that job title to make it fit what we're looking for, because we're not going to identify someone who's a program manager for a product management role more often than not. We have to, that's the most bare minimum thing that I can do to try and reduce some of these down. And then I'll certainly apply some additional filters, maybe some specific skill sets here, or, whatever it may be. But first and foremost is really just trying to match the language that's in there. And it sounds very tedious, and it's going to be, because you should have already multiple versions of your resume based on the types of roles that you're applying to. Titles are not uniform across different environments. The type of work that you might be doing under one title here might be exactly something that a company calls something entirely different. And so it's just a matter of making sure that you're giving yourself the best opportunity there to game the system a little bit. I've seen also, and I'm not recommending that anybody do this. In fact, I would say probably don't do this, but they will just they'll copy the job description and paste it in like white text into their resume, and it'll get multiple hits, and it'll be at the top of a relevancy measurement. But then you look at the resume and you manually review it, and you realize it's not a fit at all, and so it's not really doing you any favors. But I've seen it happen, and unfortunately, it does work, but I don't recommend it. So yeah, essentially, is that's the biggest part of it. Is it annoying to modify your resume for every job you apply to? Absolutely. But that's part of the system is you have to put in quality applications. You have to understand and learn the system to give yourself the best possibility of being recognized and noticed. So, I mean, that's the first thing that I would do foremost. But yeah, I mean, and also we'll go take it a step further. If you do some research on LinkedIn, see the recruiter for this role, send them a message, try and discern who's the hiring manager for this position, send them a message, try and reverse engineer their email address and send them a message there. You know, there's some pretty common naming conventions out there that you can probably figure out what it is. It's first name dot last name. It's first name last name at so and so. It's first initial last name. It's, you know, first name last initial. You just put them all into an email and send it out and see what doesn't get bounced back. That is in this market where it is so competitive. These are the things that unfortunately must be done, and you can't just go out there and put out 1,000 applications and not follow up on anything and hope to be noticed when there's so many people who are doing exactly that.
No, I think that's a really good reminder. But I guess like as far as the person who puts in white text the full job description and it doesn't match, you still have to make sure you're qualified for the roles you're looking.
Correct. Yes.
That's kind of the first step. But I completely understand those tips, and I love the idea of figuring out who the hiring manager is. And I think we're in a new kind of landscape where that would be appropriate, and like some of the ways you talked about doing them are really good reminders. Here we can move on to Saeed's question here. We have some questions coming in the chat, so we will definitely get to these after these questions, unless let me just see if any of them. Well, Sean just had like a kind of thing to add, which is setting up email job alerts so you can apply within the first 24 hours has helped me out a lot, which is probably a good reminder too. But it wasn't a question exactly. So Saeed asks, it feels near impossible to land a role despite my relentless upskilling, which I commend you for. I genuinely have a better chance and have gotten closer to being hired by a big tech company than a startup. Are most startups delusional, or am I the problem? What's causing this hardship? Which is, I'm really excited to hear what your answer is.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to understand is that the market is not in a good place right now. It is, I think the bubble burst in a big way a couple of years ago, and people have really felt that. It's never been more difficult, I think, to find a job in tech than it is. It probably was in, early to mid 2023, but and it has improved since then, but it's nowhere near what it was. There's still a lot of uncertainty out there from employers. There's not as many rapidly growing, startups out there as there was, a few years back when it seems like there was, 15 IPOs a year that were pretty, highly profiled, but it may never get back to that high water mark, but I think that right now, what you have to realize is that it's safer at most people feel, I think, a better sense of safety at a larger company. And there's probably more volume to be had at a larger company, which maybe makes sense as to why it'd be easier to get into one. And at a startup, there's a pretty commonly held belief amongst founders is that you should be able to hire the first 50 to 100 people just based on who's in your network or in your network's network. Your first few hires are going to dictate a lot of your, first 10, 20 hires, and then so on and so forth. There's a lot of referrals going on within that space because speed is key. You have to get people in place very, very quickly. You don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to hire the perfect person when you're being held to some very ambitious timelines, so I don't think that startups are delusional, and I don't think that you're the problem. I think it's somewhere in between. I wouldn't take it as this is not a you issue. This is a market issue. This is it can be very, very frustrating when you feel very qualified for something and you're not getting the responses you'd like. It certainly causes a blow, I think, to your self-confidence and to your skills. When in fact, I think you have to realize it helps to kind of reach out and see what the market looks like. You'll see exactly how many people out there are still in the same position that you are, and even people who might be more qualified than you are still in search of work. So that's gives you some, I think, glimmer of hope there. But yeah, I think during the early growth periods, it's it's difficult. It's really difficult to get into those startups, I think, because they have a really, really specific idea in mind of what they want. And not only that, they need to do it very, very quickly. And they'd rather have someone who's capable than someone's perfect. And it just may be a matter of timing. So for for example, for the company that I'm at now, it's a robotics company. We need people that have specific robotics experience. And if you don't have that, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be considered, because we don't necessarily have the time again or the luxury of having to be able to train somebody in all of the things that they need to be aware of within a certain period of time. We need someone that, as cliche as it sounds, can come in and kind of hit the ground running. And that pool is pretty small right now, especially when we're talking about humanoid robotics. So there's a lot of factors at play there. I think that, and to be fair, I think some candidates need to be a little bit more realistic with themselves as well about some of the roles that they're applying to. Is this genuinely a good fit, or is this a place that you just really, really want to work? And sometimes those things don't necessarily align, and that's maybe a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. But just because you want to work there really badly doesn't mean you're the most qualified person for the job, unfortunately. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Love the real answers. Okay, so candidate experience. Um, this one was also a question that I really was excited to hear your answer for. Why does anyone think that a candidate should spend multiple hours on a coding exercise before they've even been made aware of who the hiring manager is? I assume this comes out of frustration. I've heard this frustration.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And the short answer is because we can. It is so heavily an employer's market right now that if you don't do it, we have 100 other candidates that are going to be willing to do so, just because there's a lot of people that are hurting right now for work. And I guarantee you, in 2021, during the Great Resignation, when everybody was switching jobs and there was people were throwing money at people to move over, that there was a lot fewer. There's a lot less of this behavior and activity going on as opposed to now. And it's just a matter of the market is dictating it, and it's also if you don't do it at the very beginning and you go through a few stages of interviews, you're still going to have to do a coding exercise as an engineer. It's so commonplace now that companies need to know that you're capable of doing some kind of assessment-based exercise that allows us to see what your level of aptitude is with these different skills. So, you can either, it's a time-saving thing, I think, on both ends. And granted, the buck kind of gets passed on to you to do it on the front end and spend those, potentially hours doing these exercises. But it's going to happen one way or the other. And yeah, does it make you feel better as a candidate to get through some initial stages first? Absolutely. But I think, and I think a lot of companies are still doing it that way. There's some pretty audacious ones out there that are, yeah, like as part of your application, do a coding exercise for us. That's asking a lot, but they only are doing it because they're getting the candidates that they're still getting people. They're still finding a good pool of talent while asking this of them.
Do you think it's also a way of kind of weeding out who really wants the position? Like if
Absolutely.
you do that first, that means they really want to work there.
Absolutely. And I mean, and again, they can do it because people are willing to do it. If nobody was responding to this and nobody was doing the work, it wouldn't be in place.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, Ed asked a bunch of questions, but I liked all of them. Do you want me to start with just the first one here?
Yeah.
Uh, so I have plenty of experience, and my resume is as trimmed as possible. Why am I not being called for interviews, even for those I'm clearly overqualified for?
There's a few things I think. I mean, you kind of partially answered it yourself. If you're overqualified, I think that raises some flags for me right away. It's difficult. It's a product of the market. Once again, we are there's a surplus of talent out there right now. And so companies can be a bit more selective about finding someone who's more of an appropriate fit at this level, at this pay range. We feel comfortable here. I've seen the scenario in the past where you hire somebody who is overqualified and then they come in and they feel like the scope isn't what they're accustomed to, or they're feeling underutilized, or whatever it is within a small period of time, and then they're dissatisfied, and that causes issues. Other times, I think it's just a matter of, are we putting in a quality application here? You know, is this something where you can leverage somebody within your network to maybe highlight something there, or you can reach out to somebody on the back end, like we talked about earlier. It's frustrating. And I think that just the job search process in general is imperfect. You know, I when I worked at Indeed, they were coming up with solutions and products to try and solve for this. You know, it was, let's do more assessment-based interviewing. Let's do more things, because the kind of the resume application process is not one that people love very much. But right now, I mean, you're kind of at the mercy of the market, and that's just the sad truth of it.
I wonder if there's also a clue in Ed's question about my resume is as trimmed as possible. You know, if you have, it might be that you're working with one singular resume, and what you mentioned earlier about catering it, even though it's a lot of labor, you
Yeah.
might, I'm just guessing that that's a tip to maybe revisit. Because we're also having Viraj in the chat saying that you should only have one page for a resume, which I've
That's not, I mean, that may be true for some companies. I've not necessarily seen that to be the case. It's really, especially for people who've been in the industry for, 10, 15 plus years, that's a lot to truncate. And you might be passing over some really quality accomplishments there, or the ability to kind of discuss in a little bit of detail some of the work that might contribute to the role you're applying to now. I'd say 2 pages is probably a good limit. 1 page is almost overkill. You know, it's unless you're right out of college, unless you're still pretty early in your career, it's fine to go over a page. It's not a big deal. Yeah, but I would also say as well, making sure that you're including the right type of information in your resume. Employers like to see, again, what was your meaningful impact at that role? You know, not just you just copy and pasted responsibilities from the job description that you were just in into your resume. Tell me about the impact you made. Tell me how you affected certain measures and metrics that you were responsible for. And maybe we have the same kind of similar things that we're tracking. It'd be good to see, how that would translate to our environment. So be quantitative, be measurable, be specific about and don't talk about what your team did, talk about what you did. So many times I'm screening candidates and it's all, we did this, we did that, we did all these things. Said, okay, but what did you do? What was your specific contribution? Tell me how you affected this. Because we're not bringing your team on, we're looking to bring you on.
Oh, I think that's really good advice. Okay, let me see about these other questions from Ed. Uh, the next question is pretty simple. Like, in your view, what is the most effective path to find a job? LinkedIn application, sites like Wellfound, uh, other kinds of networking. You've touched on some of them, but if you wanted to give the kind of snapshot.
I think it goes back to putting in quality applications. There's hundreds, thousands sometimes of applicants for a single job. You have to go the extra mile. You have to really look to stand out. But I think more than any of that, the number one thing you can do is leverage your network. Even people that you're ancillary, just tangentially connected to, utilize them, lean on them, reach out to them. You never know. Just ask for a favor. Hey, I see you work at this company. They've got an opening. Would love it if you could put in a referral for me. You're so much more likely to get a conversation or a foot in the door if you come in as a referral versus a standard applicant. That's just the nature of it. People want to work with people that they know, people want to hire people that come well recommended. That's the best advice I can possibly give you, is to really, really utilize your network. And if your network is not strong, get out there and make it strong. Go to events, get involved in groups, contribute to things, be recognizable, be made aware, stand out. But there's a lot of good platforms now. LinkedIn certainly is one that is heavily trafficked. And so I think it would help sometimes to get outside of that. whatever that may be. There's a lot of different platforms. Some of them are very specific to certain areas, whether it be engineering or design or products, but to see what's out there.
Awesome. Awesome. Great advice. And then the last question here from Ed before, I think this is the last one before we move on. Yeah, to live questions, which the chat is happening, so I'm excited. So this one's about like how to take those messages you get on LinkedIn to the next level. Like he's had some interactions with
Yeah,
recruiters and doesn't know how to get it to go somewhere.
I would say what this sounds like to me is you have been included in a massive mail blast. They sent out the same message to dozens, potentially hundreds of candidates in hopes to get some responses. And maybe now either they're one, inundated with the number of responses they did get and are slowly waking their way through it. And two, which is more likely, that you were included in this massive mail blast, even though you weren't necessarily the best fit for the role. And they didn't do their diligence in reviewing every profile that was included in this message blast. And now they're realizing, yeah, he responded. I've got 30 other people that are much better fit for this. I'm going to, dedicate my time to this. Recruiting is difficult in that there's a lot of candidates to manage. There's a lot of things to juggle. There's a lot of messages. It requires a lot of organizational skills. And even then things are going to slip. Things are going to be lost and slip in the cracks. And so that's most likely what happened there. If a recruiter reaches out to you, it's likely that you're a fit for a role that they have. If they're not responding on the follow-up, it's because either they've gotten a handful of people and they're not closing the loop with you for whatever reason. They feel like they don't have enough time, or it's just a matter of there's only so many minutes in the day. But we don't like to see that. Obviously, we don't want to make a practice of that. But that sounds like to me you might have been mistakenly included in a mail blast, and then they took a deeper look and realized it's not quite the fit they thought it was.
Would it be wise for them to maybe look at what the company is hiring for and say if you're
Absolutely.
interested in one of the roles? That seems like an opportunity, maybe.
Absolutely, yeah. You certainly want to follow up on those messages if you hadn't heard back from them. You also notice that, and this could work on the candidate side as well, but on the recruiting side, you're much more likely to get a response after the second and third follow-up. So I've got a guy in my LinkedIn inbox who's sent me messages. He's probably sent me 15 messages over the last 2 weeks, and he's fully not a fit for any roles that we have, but I just admired the tenacity, so I finally responded to him. But yeah, I mean, it never hurts to continue following up.
It's encouraging. Um, okay, great. These were great answers. So I think we can move on to some live questions here. I'm going to scroll up a little bit in our chat so we don't miss anything that's been asked already. Let me see. So, we have a lot of questions. Give me 1 second. And we've got some compliments about Apptronik that they like the company. That's cool. Um, we have a simple question from Viraj. If you want to ask it out loud, feel free to let me know. Actually, can't see all the pictures of everyone. Let me change my view for a second. That'll help me make sure I don't miss anyone. I see Calvin, you have your hand up. I'm gonna ask you after I ask Viraj's question. I'll call on you to ask a question out loud. So what should an entry-level developer do in this economy to get hired? So for someone who's really like getting started, any
An
tips?
entry-level developer. I would say the best thing you can do for yourself is to target positions that are befitting of your experience. More too often we see people that are shooting for the stars and are applying for senior roles, or even roles that require 5+ years of experience. And I think that your time is better spent in looking for something that's a bit more appropriate. Also, really explore different job titles. Again, we talked about this a bit earlier. Every environment kind of has different tweaks on things. There's some pretty standard boilerplate stuff, software engineer, so on and so forth. But there's a lot of things that could be a variety of names based on a few key responsibilities, and that you still likely have a quality skill set for. So I would explore getting a little bit creative with the different kinds of job titles that you're targeting. Like somebody mentioned earlier, setting up those job alerts is really, really super helpful. You want to get in as early as possible because usually within the first, I would say, week of taking applicants, we've already probably narrowed down a list of people that is likely going to be, it's more likely that someone's going to be a finalist in there than someone that comes in later.
Awesome. I'm gonna call on some people with their hands raised, but I'll get back to the chat questions. Calvin, you have a question? Oh no,
Yeah.
you've unmuted.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So you touched on this a little bit, Brian. I kind of want to dig into some of the timing aspect of what's happening here, because obviously seeing a job get posted and then it's 24, 72 hours later and it's got hundreds of applicants. I'm kind of just curious the process of, once it hits that mark of 100, 200, 300, is it even worth putting in for something like that? Or, do you have enough quality? Like, I keep looking at this stuff and going, because I'm doing all the things that you're saying to do, right? Tailoring every resume, making sure that all the keywords are going to match and that it's a realistic fit and it all looks good. And so when I see something that's got hundreds of applicants, like I'm like, does this warrant 2 hours of my time to even attempt at that point? So curious if you could touch on a little bit more of that timing aspect.
Yeah, good question. And I would say yes, it's worth it, especially, but it comes down to how appropriate do you genuinely feel you are for the role. If you feel like it's a perfect match, and this is like the same industry that you've been working in, the same type of products you've been doing, all of these things line up. Absolutely, I think it's worth the time because we'll find you. Like the cream tends to rise to the top a little bit whenever you're talking about someone who is genuinely a good fit for these roles. And we can get pretty granular within the things that we're looking for. We tend to start with a microscope and then kind of widen it out as we need to find additional candidates that fit our criteria. So, I mean, I would say definitely it's worth the time. And you never know, like, for my example, there's a lot of recruiters out there that are carrying a pretty heavy workload, and they may not be able to check every job that they have every single day. And so those applicants are going to start piling up. And so it's going to get to a certain point before they've had a chance to clean it out, that you can definitely slip in there. It's tough to say. It's so case by case, but I would always say it's definitely, if you feel like you're a really strong fit for it, it's always worth the time.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome. And I see, Arash, you've also got your hand up. Do you want to ask your question?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for the talk. And I had the one that says Apptronik is creating cool products, and I read about Apollo. I guess my question is more to the Apptronik. I applied for a role, but what's the best way to kind of reach you, maybe Brian or any of the team members for product management roles?
Product is, candidly, it's one of the most sought after roles right now. It is, and it has been for a number of years. It's typically the roles that we find get the most applications. I think when we talk about some of the layoffs that impacted the tech industry in the past few years, I think product was a big one. Right after any kind of overhead positions, product was probably right up there with them. And I used to support product very directly and basically was siloed for it. And so I know a lot of people who are still out there looking for a position. So I can certainly empathize with some of the struggles you've had. But in terms of the best way to go about it, again, we're talking about, we have 3 roles maybe open on the product side of things. Each of them has a very specific kind of niche skill set. And just full transparency, if you don't have these niche skills, you're not going to be considered. If we need somebody that's doing motion, so if you don't have some kind of perception and sensing related to some kind of mobile robotics, we can't consider you. We have people in the pipeline that have this type of experience, and we know that that's what's necessary, and it would not make sense for us to consider people who don't have it.
Clear, thanks. Yeah, so to stand out, you should really match with those specific kind of requirements of the role for the
Yeah,
team.
I mean, granted, there are different types of product management roles. There's some that are a little bit more broad. We just need a good general PM, someone that can interface with customers and knows how to kind of impact these, very general type of metrics. Maybe where they can manage a feature or a slice of some software related product. They're a bit more broad, but when you start to get more granular like this, and you see that the requirements of the job description talk about must have XYZ. If you do not have, I would say most of, if not all of those skills, it's going to be unlikely, because we probably have people in the pipeline with the sheer volume of applications that we've got that will.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
I was muted.
Before
Before.
I want to add a quick caveat to that, though, is that I don't think that's blanket across for all roles. Just because you don't fit every single criteria for every requirement on a job description does not mean you shouldn't apply for it. I'm talking about for these intensely competitive roles, and I think product is right up there at the top of these. That's what I'm specifically speaking to. I think that it's totally fine to apply to a job where you hit most of the criteria, but not all. That's more of like a wish list in most cases of like, oh, if we find the person that has 100% of these, fantastic. We don't expect to, but then you have other roles where, again, it's highly competitive.
Oh yeah, I think that's a really helpful clarification. Thanks, Bryan.
Of course.
I'm gonna just go back to the chat just to make sure we don't miss the chat questions since they were asked earlier. So we have a question from Dustin. Any chance, Dustin, you want to ask your question out loud?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, my question, I guess, kind of goes to what you were talking about earlier, Bryan, with getting your resume flagged for interviews. I came from a startup where I was a co-founder. That was the bulk of my professional experience. We built a product, sold it to some customers, ended up shutting down the startup because the unit economics just weren't working. And then now I've been trying to find my way into a bigger tech company. And on my resume, it says, CEO, co-founder. And I'm curious how that comes across to recruiters. If it's, maybe not the best look to be coming from that type of job title. And then also, like, is it a stretch or is it dishonest to like change that to product manager, software engineer, if that was.
Let me ask you this, were you doing those jobs?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, all
Okay,
that.
then how it's not dishonest at all. It's just, yeah, and I think that especially from a product standpoint, especially from early stage products where we're going maybe from 0 to 1, we love to see a founder. We love it. Like, they know exactly about kind of ruthless prioritization and getting users involved super early on, and all this super meaningful things that not every product manager has had the exposure to or has a chance to kind of come in at that stage. So absolutely. I mean, if it's relevant, make it work in your favor. If you feel like the role that you're applying to doesn't incorporate the skills that are required of a CEO founder, but are required of a product manager, software engineer, do it play it in your favor. Have two versions of your resume, so it's easily, you can just swap between the two. Oh, this one seems like a better fit for this versus another one. So, yeah, not dishonest.
Okay. Cool. That's super helpful. Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. So we've got Faryar Gami. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name, but if you want to ask your question out loud, you can.
No worries. Hey, I'm Faryar. Can you guys hear me? Because I have an earpiece in. Okay, cool. I'm also in product, and my professional experience is mostly just in software product, but I do work in my personal life. I've worked on like hardware products and I've like led robotics workshops. So if I'm trying to target robotics companies, does that personal experience, I do have like a website showcasing the work that I've worked on. Does that help in landing a robotics role, or would you prefer to see professional work in robotics?
It's tough to say without knowing the kind of the extent of the work that you were doing. If you were, programming like an Arduino or something like that, it's kind of like lower level stuff. I think it would help to have, again, a version of your resume that does highlight that. And that maybe brings it to the forefront, so that maybe it's the first thing that they see. So that, because again, we're scanning pretty quickly here if we're having to review a lot of resumes. I think it would also help to maybe have like a link to a portfolio or something like that we might take a look at. That's more for, I think, design rules. That helps a lot. Is people ask, I saw a question on there that should we include a portfolio? You should absolutely include a portfolio. Like we're looking at that. Cover letters, maybe not so much. Portfolios, absolutely. And so I think yeah, just bring it to the forefront, highlight it, do the best you can. It's not going to guarantee that you're going to get chosen, but it's certainly going to give you the best opportunity to do it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, a lot of the work I've done is in Arduino. So you were saying earlier, if it's like more projects with like motion, sensors, stuff like that, that would actually be.
Well, for
more.
that particular role, that's a motion PM.
Yeah.
So we have one that's we have one that was on sensing. We have one that's for AI. We have one that's more customer centric. So we're gonna incorporate that into our search. You know, we want people who are specific to those areas. And it's there's not a lot of overlap, you know, necessarily with those other ones. So it's just a matter of what have you done and how can it help us right now?
Cool. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Great question. And Juan, I was going to ask your question next from the chat, but I'm hoping you're going to say it out loud right now with your hand up. If you're here still.
Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Got it. Okay. Well, I'm basically going to read my question. I have 30+ years of experience programming and as IT manager on large companies like Verizon and Schlumberger. Worked 8 years on each one, and I want to start like a new career as a programmer. No? So I did a master's on artificial intelligence, where I did, you know, all this stuff in multiprocessing, Java, Python, and I love Python. So I started programming in Python and doing quant trading. But I haven't found a job, and I've been looking for a job for 3 years here in the US. I'm an immigrant, and I find that for some reason, I mean, I perfected my resume. It's the weirdest resume you may ever have seen. It's half a page. All the information is there, and then 3 pages of projects I've done.
Yeah.
So you read half a page, you get all the info, and then if you want to scroll over the projects, it's okay. But it's been very positive in the sense that I get interviews. I get a lot of people calling me and screeners and interviews and everything. And, you know, second interview, third interview, fourth interview. But there are 2 ends to the story. It's either, sorry, we didn't choose you, an email, and that's it. Or the recruiter tells me you're overqualified and either sends me to a completely different like management job that I don't want, or just tells me I cannot responsibly hire you because you're going to leave us in 3 months or 6 months. You're going to find something else, which is completely not true because everybody says the same thing. And I feel like I'm a highly qualified programmer, which is being wasted because nobody accepts the situation. So I don't know. I'm like, maybe I should be targeting a different kind of roles, or I don't know. I don't know what's happening, but I just don't seem to be able to get hired.
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly promising that you're making it as far as you are in these interview processes. That tells me that it's probably just a matter of time. I don't think that, it's interesting that they are calling you back for multiple rounds of interviews if they've already made the decision that, you know, you're going to leave within 6 months. And so I think that the best thing that you can probably do there is to like on the front end of it, maybe provide some of the feedback that you've heard and say, this is not the case. I'm just looking for an opportunity to establish myself in a new position, in a new field. But this is probably one of the hardest times to do something like that, you know, or having 30 years of program management experience to go into a program or like a coding or development role. And any kind of transition right now is really difficult because one, there's a lot of people who are unemployed right now. There's a lot of people who are qualified in and have experience in the work that you're looking to transition into that's more maybe established or in a professional environment versus kind of maybe educational academia, those type of environments. Like I think it's more valuable to have in-seat titled experience as an engineer or a developer than it would be for someone who has a master's necessarily coming out of college. I think a lot of companies would probably align with that. I would say it is promising that you're making it this far. I would say keep doing what you're doing. It's obviously working if you're getting calls back, but do everything you can do to really downplay that previous experience and career that you had, because that's. I would also ask, are you looking to come in at a level befitting of your like tenure, or are you looking to come in at
No,
a entry-level
not
position?
at all. Not at all. I understand. I completely understand that I need to go to a junior or
Yeah.
maybe, entry level position. And I completely agree with that. And like I said, no, they don't hire me because they say I'm overqualified.
I can imagine. And it's tough probably to convince someone that you're fully prepared to take a junior level role when you've been in your career for as long as you have. But it might be helpful again just to address it on the front end, get out ahead of it and say, hey, this is some of the feedback that I've gotten in previous interviews. I want to make sure that you're aware that this is something that I am targeting, that this is something that I am satisfied in, and I'm very concerted in my efforts to find. And really, there's not much I think else you can do aside from that is just let it be known, But I would say keep trying, because there's a lot of people that aren't even making it as far as you are in those interviews. And so you're doing something right.
Yeah. Okay. Keep trying then. Thank you.
Thanks, Juan. Thanks for your thoughtful question. I see Joe has their hand up. I'd love to hear what question you have, Joe.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for putting this on, and Bryan, thank you for joining us. So a little bit of background for me. I'm a senior in college, studying computer science and finance. I've been applying primarily to entry-level software engineering positions. That is the career I want to pursue. I ended up, though, applying to one data analytics role, and that is the only job offer I've gotten. And I need to give them an answer soon. But my biggest concern right now is I'm worried that if I accept it, I won't be able to get back into software engineering. After talking to some people who were in this data analytics rotation, it sounds like they're working with a lot of low code, no code platforms, and just do maybe a little bit of SQL or Python here and there. So I'd just be curious to hear your opinion from a recruiter.
Yeah, that's a good question. Two things come to mind. Is this company big enough to have some kind of like lateral mobility program where maybe you can get into data analytics, express within a year that like, hey, I really want to try and get into more of like an engineering or developing, because like once you're in the door, it's a lot easier to move laterally than it is to come from external. And so that's a route that I would consider. And maybe talk to your recruiter about what that looks like. But the other thing is, there's nothing that says that you can't accept a job and look for another job. We see it a lot. It makes more work for us on the recruiting side, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to do what's best for you. And is it going to be frowned upon? Perhaps, but I mean, is it what you want to do ultimately? Probably. It's ethically ambiguous, I would say. But I think a lot of people will tell you that you're a means to an end for those companies. And so why can't you use these companies to be a means to an end?
For sure, yeah, I appreciate the advice. I'm hesitant to do the latter, as I got a referral from someone I'm
That is,
quite
yeah,
close
no.
with, so I don't want to burn any bridges with them.
Well, then I think your best avenue would then be to ask about lateral mobility, or at least give it a year. Maybe there's some opportunity there. You're still, you got a long way to go in your career, so it's couldn't hurt.
For sure. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
I'm once again muted. So Does anyone else have any more questions? I think I've gone through the questions that are in the chat, and I can go back to our intake questions too, because I have many of those. But let me just make sure that I haven't missed anything. And feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question while I'm looking. Oh, we've got a question from Arash, I think, or maybe that was accidental. It went away.
Oh, no, there's a question.
Okay.
I think you mentioned LinkedIn also getting pretty crowded in terms of kind of job search and a lot of applications coming in. Wellfound, a great source, but any other resources comes to your mind, Brian? Any other kind of like strategies for reaching out to specific roles?
It depends on the role, you know, like it's specifically like for software engineering and developers, you know, obviously like the GitHubs and the GitLabs of the world, like go on there and contribute, get involved in the communities there.
Maybe product side, yeah.
On the product side, there's similar kind of roles out there. What's the one? Medium is a good one. There's a lot of like product forward, like Substack is a big one that's coming up right now. They've got a big product representation on that app as well. So that could be somewhere where again you're going on there and you're just trying to network with people. You know, if maybe find somebody on LinkedIn, see if you can find some other version of social media, get in touch with them that way. Reddit's a great one. There's a lot of these subreddits out there that are great communities. And I've sourced from Reddit a number of times. You know, it's a bit of legwork, but just kind of get creative. You can go out there and Google product communities or, you know, anything at all just to get started. You know, talk to ChatGPT, it'll tell you something. But just trying to find kind of off the beaten path, untraversed avenues will certainly help.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome. Sean, do you want to ask your question out loud? I can also ask it for you.
Yeah, I can ask it out loud. I feel like I hear a lot of people talking about personal brand, and how crucial do you think that even is in today's day and age?
Yeah. I keep repeating this, but I think it's entirely dependent on the space.
Yeah.
You know, like for I think design and product, it's probably a little bit more helpful than it would be like on the engineering side, where engineering is more of like show us your code, you know, that'll tell us everything we need to know. Whereas on the product side, it's so much more subjective, and design is like so much more subjective. And so I think when that comes in, having a bit of a personal brand can certainly be helpful. Like our head of design, Sean, he's got a huge following on Instagram. We get so many applicants of like, hey, I followed Sean on Instagram and I liked his stuff, and that's what kind of led me to apply for you guys. And so I think conversely, it can work for candidates as well. I don't ever think it's, I don't want to say ever, but I think it's rare to have your brand that is where it's not going to be helpful to you or it's not going to be advantageous.
KB, if you're still here, you can ask your question out loud. I'm really sorry if I missed it. You might have left. We will see.
Oh, okay. Is it for me? Thank you.
Oh, I think it was
Yeah.
for KB, but if you have a
Oh,
question,
sorry. I heard like TV. Okay. Yeah, I can wait for him.
I think he left and I accidentally just flipped through my slides. I think they are gone. So if
Okay,
you have a
okay.
question, go for it.
Okay, thank you very much for such a nice or useful talk. So basically, yeah, I am a recent graduate, or I'm graduating in May. I am also having difficulty getting the job. My field is like the physical science. I'm graduating in physics, and I'm kind of looking for any like data science related job. And yeah, is there any better way to get a job for recent graduate? What is the technique we need to follow to get the job? Like all of the jobs nowadays are telling like experiences. Even though we have used like many programming languages like Python or etc. in
I mean,
the
I would.
research.
Does your university offer any kind of like placement programs, or do they have any resources that you can look into about, you know, people who are fresh graduates? That's the first place that I would look, especially at the specific school that you're attending. Aside from that, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but get involved in some of these communities out here. And it helps, especially as early on as you are in your career, you can really kind of help to establish yourself as someone who is known within that space. And it's only going to kind of grow from there. Aside from that, it's all the tips that we've provided so far is if you're putting in applications, take the additional time. If it's a place you really want to work and you feel like you're qualified for it, take the additional however long it's going to be. It could be 15, 20 minutes of, trying to find some way to kind of make yourself stand out, whether that be through modifying your resume, whether it be through following up with people on LinkedIn or other platforms. Just trying to go the extra mile. Just don't put in the same application everybody else is putting in.
Okay, thank you. So also another question I have, like, I still found like some of the companies or platform I have applied for, they are sending coding assessments, but I don't find like anybody proctoring there, or like just they send the assessment. So do you think that is still like relevant in the age of AI if there is no proctoring, or
Well, a lot of
are
them are recording
they
keystrokes and things like that. So like they have ways of knowing if it's your code that's being produced, even if there's nobody there to proctor it. So is that kind of the question you're asking?
Yeah, like I mean, if somebody who uses AI and submit all the answer versus somebody who worked for like long time, and still their code might be not perfect because of some minor error, that scenario might come in the coding. So how do they judge actually? That was my question.
That's a great question. I'm not entirely sure. You got me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course, sorry about that.
We have just a couple minutes left. I'm really sorry we're not going to get to everybody's questions. We've had so many good ones. I do want to give Manohar maybe the opportunity to ask their question because they wrote it in the chat quite a while ago. So Manohar, I see your hand is up. Do you want to ask it out loud? I can also read it. Here, I'll read it out loud then. Interrupt me if you want. I worked as a mechanical engineer for 5 years. Now I made the switch to user experience design, which is a total domain switch. I am currently now in school pursuing master's in human-centered design. I just completed 1 year, but from what I hear, the market is really bad. Will it get better? I have a portfolio and getting some hands-on experience in my coursework as well. I'm really left confused if I made a good decision taking that risk and switching. I thought that was
asking me to predict the future of the job market. That is, your guess is as good as mine. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. What I've noticed in what is pretty commonly held is that as interest rates go down, hiring goes up. As money is more freely available, companies are more willing to spend it. And so that's what we saw kind of during the big COVID boom was, and I'm assuming that's kind of going to be repeated, but there's companies out there that have funding that they're ready to hire. It's just a matter of finding the fit, I think, right now, but I could not possibly tell you what the future looks like as it comes to the job market. Cautiously optimistic, I think, is what I would say.
And maybe if the dance question is super quick, we can get to your question. You've had your hand raised for quite a while. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, Brian, for answering a lot of questions. That might really be a big help for a lot of us here. I had a quick question. So recently in the last week, I applied for a job on Wellfound itself. There was a striking alignment between my experience and the job alignment, right? So I'm looking for I'm looking for AI engineer jobs. Currently, I have 1 year of experience working as research assistant here, and I've worked for 2 years back in India. So they were so interested. I mean, I had a call with the CTO. And I had round 2. I had a call with CEO also. Even that went well. And again, they arranged a coding assessment for me. And honestly, I won't be lying. I cleared all the test cases, right? So it was super impressive for them too. I mean, everything was pretty good. And 4 days down the line, they sent me a rejection. So I mean, how do you want me to receive that?
I can't tell you how how relatable that is. You know, I
Yeah.
prior to joining Apptronik, I was unemployed for a considerable period of time, and I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I got to a final round of a process only to be rejected when I felt like I could not have done anything possibly better. You put your best foot forward, you feel like you crushed the interview, you walk out of it being like, "There's no way I'm not going to get hired," and then they go,
Yeah.
It's never easy, and it never gets easier, but it's just it's the nature of it, you know, and there's going to be the one that you do land. But there's nothing really that can be done about that. If you feel like you did it, you said it yourself. You said all the calls went great, the coding exercise, you cleared all the test cases. There's nothing you could have done. I think it's just a matter of they felt like there's so many qualified candidates in the market right now that it's just harder than it's ever been. And all I can tell you is just keep on going. You know, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Just last question. I mean, you can answer that quickly too. How do we make sure like our resume gets through the ATS? I mean, are we even receiving rejections from a human, or is just a machine rejecting us?
I would say it's a bit of both. I go in and I have to manually select who's rejected, and then it automates an email based on a template that we created for a number of reasons. If it's someone who's gotten particularly far in a process, we can add some color to it to give some additional feedback in terms of why they were rejected. Others will receive a phone call if they've been on site. But there's a lot of automated parts of it, yes.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Vedant. Sorry to cut you off. I don't know if Bryan has a call. Might jump on a call with someone after this, so I don't want to keep him over time since I know he has to interview a lot of people in his role. But thank you all so much for coming. This was really stimulating and engaging, and I'm so glad so many people spoke out loud. Bryan, you were amazing. Thank you for being so generous with your time and your insights and all the things you've learned from being in the industry. I think it was really helpful. I definitely learned some things too. Alejandro's shared a survey in the chat. If anyone could give us some feedback, I would love to have it. This is a new program, and any insights that you have for our Ask a Recruiter series is really helpful as well. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks so much, Rachel. This is awesome. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, we
Thank you,
really
everyone.
appreciate it as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bryan.
Thanks again, Bryan. This was really great.